I woke up to the unmistakable crackle of a bonfire. Not mine. For a second I thought I was dreaming. Then the low hum of voices, laughter, and the clanking of beer bottles pulled me into reality. I shot up in bed, heart pounding, and threw open the curtain. My land, was swarming with tents. Dozens of them. Bright orange, forest green, and blue specks blotting out the pristine meadow I had spent years keeping untouched. Smoke curled into the sky, the scent of charred wood and singed marshmallows thick in the air. I grabbed my boots, jammed my arms into a jacket, and stormed outside. The scene only got worse. Folding chairs were scattered like they'd been launched. From a trebuchet, coolers spilled their contents into the grass, and a group of kids trampled through my vegetable garden like it was a goddamn playground. A bonfire blazed a few feet away from my barn. I could already hear the dry wood in its walls groaning from the heat. And then I saw her, Karen Whitmore, president of the Oak Hollow HOA, mid-50s, perfectly coiffed bob, Patagonia vest zipped, up like she was leading an Arctic expedition, and a clipboard, because of course she had a clipboard. She stood in the center of the chaos, arms folded, overseeing everything like a general surveying her troops. "Karen!" My voice came out sharper than intended, but I didn't care. I stomped up to her, nostrils flaring. "What the hell is going on?" She turned, plastering on that condescending smile she always reserved for people she deemed beneath her. "Oh, good morning, Nathan," she trilled, as if I had just strolled over to borrow a cup of sugar. "Lovely weather, isn't it?" I ignored the small talk. "What are all these people doing on my land?" She sighed as if I were a child asking why the sky was blue. "The HOA is hosting our annual wilderness retreat. A beloved tradition." She gestured at the horde of campers like she was presenting a prize on a game show. "Isn't it wonderful? Families bonding with nature, learning self-sufficiency, a true communal experience." I clenched my fists. "You can't just show up and turn my property into a campsite." Karen arched a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "Actually, Nathan, I can. The Oak Hollow bylaws state that any land deemed communal green space may be used for sanctioned HOA events." I felt my pulse hammering against my skull. "This isn't communal green space. This is my private property." She gave me a pitying look, the kind reserved for the village idiot. "Oh, sweetie, I'm afraid that's incorrect. Your land was rezoned last year when the new Environmental Preservation Initiative passed." I blinked. "What?" Karen tapped her clipboard. "Page 73, Section 4, Subclause B. If a property exceeds 5 acres and falls within Oak Hollow jurisdiction, the HOA may designate portions of it for community use, provided it's not an active development." I could barely process the words. That's not even legal," Karen chuckled. "Of course it is. The HOA worked very closely with the zoning committee. You should have attended the meetings, dear. Meetings she scheduled last minute and never properly announced. Meetings held at inconvenient times, usually when I was at work. Meetings where she rammed through absurd new rules while half the neighborhood was in the dark. I inhaled sharply. "I want everyone off my property, now." Her smile remained, but I saw the flicker of amusement in her eyes, the kind of sick satisfaction of someone who enjoyed pushing people to the brink. "Oh, Nathan, don't be so dramatic. This will all be wrapped up by tomorrow morning." A glass bottle shattered somewhere behind her. A group of teens whooped as they tossed another one at a tree. I pointed. "They're destroying my land." "They're having fun. The bonfire is too close to my barn. It's contained. You can't do this." Her expression hardened. "I already am doing this. And unless you want to rack up a nice pile of HOA fines for obstructing a community event, I suggest you relax and let the festivities continue." My fingers curled into my palm, nails digging into my skin. I wanted to scream. Instead, I turned on my heel and walked back toward my house, forcing myself not to look at the damage, the trash, the beer cans, the careless destruction. I was outnumbered. Fighting would get me nowhere. But Karen had just made a mistake. A big one. She thought she was untouchable, that she could rewrite reality, change the rules on a whim, twist logic until it bent to her will. She had no idea what was coming. I stepped onto my porch and leaned against the railing, eyes sweeping across the chaos unfolding on my land. My private land? She wanted to turn this into a nightmare for me? Fine. I'd return the favor. At dawn, the bull would run. But for now, I had to wait. I spent the rest of the night watching the invaders from my porch, my fists clenched around the railing. I could hear the distant roar of Karen's laughter as she held court among the campers, basking in their admiration. She had that way about her. When she wasn't ruling with an iron fist, she played the benevolent dictator, making people believe she was their protector, their voice, their leader. It made me sick. The bonfire raged on, flickering shadows stretching across my land, illuminating the beer cans and trampled grass. I could see them wandering too close to my barn, their silhouettes swaying in the firelight. A couple had even set up a hammock between the wooden posts of my fence, as if my property was some kind of public park. The bull snorted from his pen, sensing the intrusion. He was a massive thing, black as night with horns that curved upward, like hooks. I'd raised him from a calf, and he was as stubborn as he was strong. A good animal. A dangerous one, if given the right motivation. I just had to be patient. As the night wore on, the chaos escalated. Someone, probably one of the drunker campers, had set up a makeshift fireworks display. A sudden burst of red and white shot into the air, exploding into a shower of sparks that rained down dangerously close to my barn's roof. I bolted upright. "Are you out of your damn minds?" I shouted, storming toward them. The group turned, blinking at me like I was some strange forest creature speaking an alien language. One of them, a frat boy type in a North Face jacket, grinned and held up another. Bottle rocket. "Relax, man, we got it under control." I swatted the firework from his hand. "You set my barn on fire, and I'll be putting you out with a shovel." Whoa, hostile much? Another guy, this one swaying on his feet, slurred. "This is a celebration, dude. The community coming together. Karen said so." I turned. Karen stood a few feet away, arms crossed, watching the exchange like it was some kind of entertainment. "Having a little trouble embracing the spirit of the event, Nathan?" she called out. "You're putting my property at risk," I shot back. "Oh, please." She waved a dismissive hand. "The fire marshal is aware of the event. Everything is being done safely." "Does the fire marshal also approve of the fact that half these idiots are drunk?" She gave me a tight-lipped smile. "I'd watch the accusations if I were you. Slandering your neighbors isn't very community-friendly." The audacity of it. This woman, standing on my land with her army of trespassers acting like she was the victim. It made my blood boil, but I smiled. A slow, knowing smile. "Enjoy your night, Karen," I said. She watched me as I turned away, suspicion flickering in her eyes, but she said nothing. Let her think she'd won. By the time dawn broke, the campers were dead asleep, sprawled across my land in their tents, hammocks, and sleeping bags like a plague of locusts. The bonfire was reduced to smoldering embers, and empty beer bottles littered the grass like gravestones. Perfect. I strolled down to the barn, unlatched the pen, and gave my bull a firm pat on the flank. "Go on, boy," I murmured. "Wake 'em up." He charged. The first scream came 5 seconds later, then another, then chaos. The bull tore through the campsite, hooves thundering against the earth, barreling straight into the clusters of tents. Fabric shredded as campers scrambled to escape, diving out of their sleeping bags, tripping over themselves. Someone shrieked, "What the hell is that?" My God, is that a bull? I leaned against the fence, watching the stampede unfold. Tents collapsed. Coolers spilled open. Someone, one of Karen's die-hard bootlickers, tried to wave his arms and calm the bull down, only to be met with a violent headbutt that sent him flying. Karen, disheveled and wild-eyed, emerged from her tent, her Patagonia, vest unzipped, hair sticking up in manic tufts. "Who let a goddamn bull loose?" she screamed. I raised a hand. "That'd be me!" Her face contorted in disbelief. You think this is funny?" "Not particularly. Just figured my private land needed a little morning exercise." "You've lost your mind." "Oh, have I?" I gestured to the horde of squatters she had invited onto my property. Because from where I'm standing, you're the one who thought it was a great idea to turn my land into a damn music festival." She pointed a trembling finger at me, eyes blazing. "You are going to be in so much trouble, Nathan. You have no idea who you're messing with." I smirked. "Neither do you." Before she could retort, the sheriff's SUV rumbled up the gravel road. Karen perked up instantly, smoothing her vest, her expression shifting to something resembling righteous victimhood. "Finally," she huffed, "arrest this lunatic." The sheriff, a tall, broad-shouldered man with the permanent expression of someone who had seen too much, stepped out of the vehicle and took one long, sweeping look at the wreckage. Then he turned to Karen. "You got about 10 seconds to explain why there's a trespassing complaint with your name on it." Karen froze. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, and for the first time since this nightmare began, she didn't have an immediate answer. I crossed my arms, watching her. "Squirm a checkmate?" "Not yet. But soon, very soon." Karen recovered quickly. She always did. Her hands smoothed over her Patagonia vest as she turned to the sheriff, her expression shifting from shock to righteous indignation so seamlessly it was almost impressive. "Sheriff," she said, voice dripping with exasperation, "I don't know what Nathan's been telling you, but this is a community event. The Oak Hollow HOA sanctioned this retreat months ago." "On his land?" The sheriff raised an eyebrow. Karen scoffed. "It's designated community green space." I folded my arms. "That's funny. My deed doesn't say that." The sheriff turned to me. "Nathan, you got a complaint to make?" "Damn right I do. Criminal trespassing, property damage, and reckless endangerment." I gestured to the bonfire pit, the beer cans, the footprints trampling my crops. "These people weren't invited, and they sure as hell weren't careful." Karen let out, a sharp laugh as if the very idea was ridiculous. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. No one damaged anything. I had people lighting fireworks next to my barn, Karen." She waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, that was just a bit of harmless fun." The sheriff exhaled slowly, adjusting his belt. "Karen, I need to see the documentation that says this land is HOA controlled." "Oh, absolutely," she said, quickly. I don't have it on me, but I can pull it up in the records." "Mm-hmm," the sheriff grunted, unimpressed. "How about this? You and your campers pack up and get off Nathan's property while I look into it. That way, we don't have to escalate things." Karen's eyes flashed with fury. "That is completely unnecessary. I am telling you this land is private property," the sheriff said bluntly, "until I see otherwise." Karen bristled, but she knew better than to argue directly with law enforcement. Instead, she turned her attention back to me, her expression darkening like a brewing storm. "You'll regret this," she muttered, voice low enough that only I could hear. I smiled. "I already regret ever letting you set foot on my property." Karen stalked off, barking orders at the campers, her cheerful cult leader facade cracking with every passing second. People scrambled to pack their tents, throwing half-empty coolers into SUVs, muttering under their breath. Karen's illusion of control was slipping. But she wasn't done. Not even close. I should have known she wouldn't let it go. By the next afternoon, the fines started rolling in. A thick envelope appeared in my mailbox, courtesy of the Oak Hollow. Joe A., listing a series of violations so absurd I thought it was a joke at first. Unauthorized livestock activity. Livestock may not be used to harass, threaten, or disturb HOA members. The bull. Unsanctioned agricultural use. All crop growing. Activity must be approved by the HOA Agricultural Board. My vegetable garden. Failure to maintain communal property. Homeowners must ensure designated green space remains accessible and welcoming to all residents. My entire damn property? General non-compliance, just in case they needed a catch-all. Excuse, total, $14,750 due in 7 days. I let out a slow breath, staring at the ridiculous total. She wasn't just retaliating, she was declaring war. I stormed down to the HOA office, slamming the notice onto Karen's desk. She looked up, utterly unfazed. "Nathan," she said smoothly. "What a pleasant surprise." "You think this is funny?" I snapped. She tilted. Her head. It's protocol. You knowingly violated multiple HOA regulations. I leaned in, my voice low and sharp. This is extortion. Karen sighed, feigning disappointment. Nathan, I warned you about being difficult. I told you this is a community, and we all have to follow the same rules. Rules you made up overnight. Her lips curled. Prove it. I clenched my jaw. Now, she continued, lazily adjusting a paperweight on her desk. If you'd like to appeal these fines, you're welcome to present your case at the next HOA board meeting. When's that? She smiled. 3 months from now. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're unbelievable. Karen simply shrugged. I'm efficient. I stared at her for a long moment, something cold settling in my chest. She thought she had me. She thought she had backed me into a corner that I'd break under the pressure, just like the others before me. I leaned down until I was level with her, my voice calm, measured. You're making a mistake, Karen. Her smile didn't waver. Oh, Nathan. She let out a pitying sigh. You already made yours. I turned on my heel and walked out. By the time I got home, the for sale signs were already going up. Not on my property, on my neighbor's. Karen wasn't just after me. She was tightening her grip on the entire community. The houses closest to mine, people I'd known for years, suddenly had bright, shiny real estate signs planted in their yards, all of them HOA approved. She was pushing people out, and I knew why. I'd spent the afternoon digging. If Karen was willing to go this far to control the land, there had to be a reason, and I'd found it. Buried in old county zoning documents, buried deep in the fine print, buried so well that only someone looking for it would ever see. There it was. The hidden clause, the loophole, the one thing Karen had overlooked, the one thing that could bring her entire house of cards crashing down. I stared at the paper in my hands, my heart pounding. I finally had it. The way to destroy her. And she had no idea. I picked up my phone and dialed. A familiar voice answered. Nathan? What's going on? I exhaled, gripping the paper tighter. I need your help. A pause. Then, what did Karen do this time? I smiled. Oh, you'll see. By the time the HOA board meeting rolled around, the room was packed. Karen sat at the head of the table, serene, composed, victorious. She hadn't even tried to hide her smirk when I walked in. The room was filled with her people, the committee members she had handpicked, the neighbors who feared her, the homeowners. Too spineless to challenge her reign, I took my seat, folded my hands, waited. Karen cleared her throat, and the murmuring died down. Let's begin. The meeting dragged through minor complaints, ridiculous policy updates, and an absurdly long discussion about mailbox paint colors. Then, finally, she turned to me. Nathan. Her voice was silk and steel. You filed an appeal against your fines. Would you like to present your case? I leaned forward. No appeal, just an announcement. Karen raised an eyebrow, amused. Oh? Do tell. I set down the document. The loophole. The one thing she never saw coming. This, I said calmly, is the original Oak Hollow land charter, signed over 50 years ago, before the HOA even existed. I slid it across the table. Turns out, this community wasn't always under HOA control. The land wasn't annexed legally. A hush fell over the room. Karen's smile faltered, but she caught herself. Nathan, I don't know what you think you found, but Oak Hollow has operated under HOA governance for decades. The bylaws are very clear. The bylaws are invalid, I cut in. Because the HOA was formed illegally, the county never approved the jurisdiction transfer, which means, I let the words sink in, which meant the HOA had no real authority over this neighborhood. Karen's face had gone pale. Bullshit, she said, voice tight. I shrugged. I had a lawyer verify it. I turned in my seat. Sheriff? All heads turned to the back of the room where the sheriff leaned against the doorway, arms folded. Karen stiffened. Already checked it out, the sheriff said lazily. Nathan's right. HOA's got no legal foundation. Never did. Gasps rippled through the room. A few people exchanged nervous glances. I smiled. So, Karen, I have just one question for you. She glared at me, teeth clenched. I leaned forward, relishing every second. What happens when an entire HOA is ruled invalid? Silence, a deadly, satisfying silence. Then, panic. The board members started whispering furiously to one another. Someone stood up. This can't be true. Oh, it's true, I said. And you know what that means? Every HOA fine you've ever issued is unenforceable. Every restriction, every rule, worthless. Chaos erupted. Homeowners, ones who had been silent for years, turned on her. You mean all the fees I've been paying? She made me sell my house over an HOA violation. What about the landscaping fines? You forced my father to remove his ramp for his wheelchair. Was that illegal? Karen slammed her hand on the table. This is outrageous. You people have benefited from my leadership. Your leadership? Someone shouted. You've been scamming us for years. A neighbor I barely knew stood up, pointing at her. You kicked my sister out of her house for putting up a birdhouse. Karen's mask cracked. I did what was best for this community. I stood, meeting her eyes. No, you did what was best for yourself. More shouts, more anger. The mob was turning. Karen realized it too. Late! No, listen. She raised her hands. This is just a misunderstanding. You're done, Karen, I said. Her face twisted. You think you've won? She hissed. You think this is over? I just smiled, because I had one final card to play. I turned back to the sheriff. She still has to answer for the trespassing, the fines, the illegal property seizures. Karen froze. The sheriff sighed. Yeah, looks like we'll have to open an investigation. Karen blanched. No. She shook her head. No, I did nothing wrong. People in the room laughed. You did plenty, I said. And finally, I saw it. That moment of absolute crushing realization. Karen had lost. The aftermath was glorious. Karen resigned the next day. More like disappeared. She slithered out of town, her power shattered, her legacy ruined. The HOA, gone. Dissolved, a dead relic of a dictatorship no one wanted. The community transformed overnight. Gone were the absurd fines, the arbitrary rules. The neighborhood came back to life. Houses that had been forced into soulless uniformity began to change. Porches painted in bright colors, gardens spilling past neat little borders, bird feeders swinging from trees. And me? I was free. I sat on my porch, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise over my land, untouched, unbothered. And Karen? She wasn't just gone. She was forgotten. A bad memory, a cautionary tale, a reminder that power only lasts when people let it. I leaned back, smiling. I had won, and I never planned on losing again.